Do you remember show and tell? Well, I loved it. And today we're going to speak to somebody who has created a new adventure in storytelling for all of us. It's called Show and Tales. Yes, you can take one of your beloved souvenirs and make it a life legacy story for everyone. This is Adriane Berg. This is the Ageless Traveler. Our motto is never stop traveling. And if you want to be in a group of like-minded people who love to travel, join our Facebook salon, listen to our podcasts, give us a great rating on YouTube, and there's so much more. We have free ebooks on caregiving and travel, as well as on luxury travel for less because, gee, who doesn't want discounts? How do you get all of these things? Very simple. Go to agelesstraveler.com and join us. Martie McNabb. Martie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for this invitation and this opportunity.
Well, it's a great opportunity for us too. So let's start with something that fascinated me. And that is the fact that you help people create their own legacy stories, their own personal stories. You call yourself a personal historian. And one of the things you do is you have people focus on an item or a photograph, and then stories emerge from that. So I'm going to relate that to a part of travel that we rarely discuss, and that is souvenirs. In fact, when we do our YouTube, I'm going to show and cut in some of my souvenirs. Now, they're important to me. I schlep them around from one place to another, and so do many people. And then everyone says, throw them out. What are they? They're no good for anything. Your kids don't want them. So you tell me, have you ever had an encounter with somebody where they did do a personal history around a souvenir? And if not, how could that be done?
Yes. Well, thank you for starting us off. I see all our photos and our objects, the things we surround ourselves with and adorn ourselves with, as souvenirs to an extent, but specifically souvenirs from our travels. I do have a live interactive event specifically about souvenirs. So it's Show and Tales, the travel edition. And I welcome people to come and show the things that they've picked up. And this, it's not really that things matter. It's that the stories that get attached to them that often do.
Can you tell everybody where to find that so that they can participate and see how others are participating?
Absolutely. So my website is Show and Tales, and that's TALES.com. And I also have a YouTube channel and a podcast called Things That Matter with Martie McNabb. I'm not doing as many virtual events this year because I'm being one of the main caregivers to my 90-year-old mother-in-law and my 88-year-old mother. So it's been a bit challenging to fit everything in.
Well, I can understand that. And in a few minutes when we take our break, I'll tell everybody about a book that we are coming out with. It's an ebook called The Caregiver's Travel Guide, so that people like yourself who are caregivers can hints and tips and inspiration. We call it self-determination. It's important.
That's lovely. That is so exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
So now we understand. Let's get back to the idea of taking an item, an object, and creating your own story about it. I loved show and tell when I was in kindergarten. But how do you do that? What's your process? Because you are also an artist storyteller. What's your process with regard to this?
My first business is called Memories Out of the Box. And I worked with individuals who had boxes and bags and suitcases and storage units and attics and basements full of photos and documents and memorabilia, things that they've saved and or inherited in their lives, with the goal of spending many hours and curating and organizing them and then telling a visual narrative. When you bring out an object, a card or a letter or a thank you note or teeth or the little bracelet from when you brought your baby home from the hospital. These are things that, and of course, souvenirs, it brings back the entire experience by touching it and maybe even smelling it and holding it. It brings back these memories.
Well, you remind me of Proust, the Madeline. He sat there with a cookie, he remembered his past. But without that cookie in front of him, that Madeline, it wouldn't have come out. And we talk
Yeah.
about life bios a lot. We talk about
Oh,
reminiscences and memory for older adults. And I remember asking my 92-year-old mother questions, and she said, I don't know, or no, or yes. And she was a shy person to begin with, and I got really very little out of her. And then my daughter had to do it for a project in high school, and the same thing happened. I actually have the tape, but you just see a shy older woman not answering. So I love the
yeah.
solution that you've
I
come
love
up
that.
with. Beautiful,
Yeah,
beautiful
and
solution.
my mother has the same experience, and my father too, is that when I ask them specific things like you did and your daughter did, it's just, I don't know, some people don't respond to it, but if you hand them something and
Right.
say, Grandma, tell me the story of this, it can open up a conversation that's more rich.
And speaking of that, we are going to be traveling with Martie and her caravan in a couple of minutes. And we're going to show you how to do this because if you have souvenirs, things that you love, you can create your own story around them. And people have been doing this with Martie all over the U.S. because she is traveling. We're going to talk about her caravan travelers and how she's creating these story tales, the show and tell, where you take an object and you may make your own story around it and share it with your loved ones. Maybe the kids don't want to hear about it, but the grandkids do. So don't you guys go anywhere. We'll be right back. What are you doing between March 29th and April 12th, 2025? Are you going on safari? Well, we are. Please come with us on our very first Ageless Traveler trip. I will make sure that you see everything that's on your bucket list. We're going with the very famous Colette Tours, one of the oldest tour operators in the United States. They know us, they respect us, and they provide for us everything that we need. Yes, we are going to Kenya. We will see the city of Nairobi. We're going to the Serengeti. We will see the Big Five. We will also have adventures of a lifetime. If you have been studying safari, or even if you have gone on many safaris, this is something really different. So, how do you find out about it and get your special discounts because you're an ageless traveler? Very simple. Go to agelesstraveler.com. That's our website, agelesstraveler.com. Take a look at featured trips. Get the details by clicking right there. You can do everything from inquire, get your question answered, to book right away so that you're going with us. It is a terrific, terrific tour. And by the way, you can also go to the Masai Mara on an optional pre-trip tour. There's a lot more to it than that because there's yet more opportunity if you have longed to trek with the gorillas in Uganda. Yep, we can make that happen too. So please take a look at agelesstraveler.com, featured travel, and go on safari with us. Okay, we are back. We're here with Martie McNabb. Now, if this hasn't hooked you, the idea of taking one of your souvenirs, weaving a story around it, or if you have an older loved one and you want to get something from them that lights them up, take one of their possessions. Don't throw them away. Take one of their possessions, show it to them, and you will be shocked at the fabulous stories you get. But there is an expertise in this, and Martie McNabb has this expertise. And she's taken it on the road. Tell us about that.
Yes. So let's see, 6 years ago, a perfect storm happened, and I decided it was time to sell my apartment in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn, and figure out what was next in my life. And I didn't know where I wanted to move to after New York. It's very hard to make a decision to move someplace else. I thought, well, why don't I travel around the country and visit places and for a long period of time, like for a month at a time or something, and get a sense of the community and if that would be a right place, my next home, so to speak. And so I ended up buying a little 21-foot camper van, a Winnebago Travato, and her name is Brooklyn because if it weren't for my apartment in New York City that I sold. I would not have been able to afford her. So she just turned 103,000 miles. Let's see, probably a month and a half ago. So I've been traveling and taking my show and tales on the road, as you say, and doing them in person and then also virtually. It all started in Brooklyn, actually in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn, at a friend of mine's bar called Branded Saloon. But then I've had the interesting opportunity to offer it at cemeteries and funeral homes and senior living communities, and I've even done them for a special wedding experience to connect the different sides of the family to one another so that they're there to support the couple, and they agree that they're going to support the couple, but they often don't know one another very well. So I'm looking to take it to as team building activities as well. It's amazing how much, like you said, how much you can learn from somebody, even if you've known them for your entire life. So yes, like you've encouraged your listeners to, go into people's homes, or when you're on Zoom, ask people about the things that are behind them in their little window. You just the simplest things. It doesn't have to be heirlooms. Honestly, it's. I believe everything has a story.
Yes, I do encourage everybody to do this in their own mind first. Take a look at something that you own, that you love, that you wonder why you fixated on, and tell the story to yourself and see how interesting it is. It's a pretty interesting story. And that helps younger people also know who older people are. If you're trying to relate to your grandma, let's say, and you love her, but you don't even know her, take one of the objects in her home. And of course, if it's a souvenir, if it's a travel souvenir, wonderful things will happen. So I'm going to swap with you. I'm going to ask you to tell one of the stories that's one of your favorites from your travels, and you're taking show and tales on the road. Some story that came out, and then I'll swap with you. I'll tell you one. So let's hear one of your favorites.
Awesome. I love that. I was hosting a show for the Global Grief Conference a couple of years ago, and it was like multiple tracks were being offered. And there was this lovely man who's a psychologist, a teacher and psychologist, and he found out about my event and he really wanted to be there, but he was also offering something at the same time. So that was the inspiration for me to finally start my podcast. And I invited him on, and he brought a plastic air freshener that you put in the vent of a car, just a $2, insignificant thing that you would never believe that it had a unique story. But he proceeded to share the story of his daughter who, insisted that they go get this air freshener because if she was going to be forced to be inside her dad's car, it was smelly and she didn't want to deal with that. Needless to say, this young woman passed away just a couple of years after this. And he holds on to this object as a way to remember his lovely daughter and his relationship. And you could just see how he lit up. I mean, it's a sad experience, but he just lit up when he talked about the story attached to this $2 air freshener fan.
My father-in-law had a sketch of his wife. It wasn't a photo. It was a sketch. And I asked him about it, and he told me an amazing story. He was a guard in a prisoner of war camp during World War II. He was also one of the first people to liberate the first concentration camp that anybody ever came across, called Ageless, with Marshall and so on. But he was a guard in a prisoner of war camp. Now, remember, these were German soldiers. He was a Jew. He had just liberated a concentration camp that he couldn't talk about for all of his life. You can imagine what his feelings must have been, except that this German soldier was 18 years old and being picked on, and he helped him. Turns out that this German young man was a great artist.
Yeah.
And he said to him, "Do you have a picture of your wife?" And he showed it to him, and he made this sketch. And the guy did get, eventually he was freed and he became a very fine German artist. And my father-in-law, who had helped a German, had this beautiful picture of his wife. So it was a World War II. So I mean, it was everything you could think of. When we come
Wow.
back, we'll tell a few travel stories. Don't you guys go anywhere. If you take long trips or travel through different climate zones the way I do, you don't want to schlep a lot of luggage. Well, luggage-free ships to many of the hotels in the world and mostly all the cruise ships. I've been recommending luggage-free for years to my friends and family, and I always hear the best rave reviews. So you visit agelesstraveler.com, products and services, to access luggage-free, get all the information, and stop schlepping. And now we are back. We're having some fascinating conversations with Martie McNabb. Show and Tales. She's going to tell you again how to find her podcast, how to find her YouTube and her work.
Yes. So you can find me at showandtales.com. And that's where I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Now, with regard to your item, something that you love. Great.
Yes. Yes. So when I started this process 5 years ago, getting my camper van, of course, I had a lot of people who were concerned about me traveling the country by myself. I was single at the time. That has changed in the course of a couple of years, but I was single at the time, and I bought Brooklyn with the idea that I was going to do mostly solo travel, which I actually still am too, because my wife is not particularly big on van life, but still I was alone and people were worried, and they were like, you should have a travel companion. And they were like encouraging me to get a dog to travel with me, or a cat, or something. And I knew that I would be worried sick that the animal would get lost. It would get, it would sneak out. It would get too hot or anything. So there was no way I was going to do that. So I just so happened to get a wonderful package from Blue Q, which is a funky company, and they're quirky, and they always put lots of great stuff in their box. And I took out, and there was basically a picture of a cat in it, like on a piece of paper, talked about it being the flat cat. And at that moment, I cut it out, I put it on cardboard, and I named it Flatsy. And so Flatsy, the flat cat, travels with me in Brooklyn, the camper van, and has traveled probably at least 100,000 miles of the trip. And so we have a nice little conversation at times, and people often start conversations with me about her because she looks real. And anyway, she just keeps me company and keeps me laughing along the way.
We're here with Martie McNabb. We are show and telling because her platform is Show and Tales, and you'll find that in showandtales.com. And of course, she goes all around the country, and she elicits people's memories, histories, creates legacy stories around items, objects. And this could be anywhere from people who are in assisted living, people who are actually honoring somebody who's passed away, honoring people who are getting married, or telling their own personal travel stories. Now, I'll digress for a minute. One of the things that people love to do is write travel memoirs. I know, because on our website, we ask people if they have good travel stories, would they like to add it to our blog? And of course, we're professionals, so we have requirements for that. But you'd be surprised how many wonderful stories people have just because of travel. And they're usually people-to-people stories. So let's go back to you, Martie. Not so much about the stories, but about the travels. You've been traveling a lot, over 100,000 miles in this country. So tell us a little bit about some of the places that you liked to go. Maybe we'll go.
Yeah. So 2 years ago, I knew that my wife was getting ready to retire. And like I said, she's not a big van life person. So I thought, this is the opportunity. I'm out in Albuquerque. My mom is in Vermont. So I've come out here. Probably that was the 6th time I had done that cross country trip, which is 2,200 miles. and one way. And I decided I'm not going to get any closer to California than this, than in Albuquerque. And I thought, okay, she's not going to ever want to go on a 5-month road trip with me. So I might as well take this opportunity and do it. I ended up planning out how I could travel out to California, up the coast, and then back to Vermont, which is to get back to my mom. And I would say some of my favorite, well, needless to say, people are my favorite thing. And relationships.
We got that already. We know that already.
I know. So I think most of my travel was based on the friends that I have not seen in a while, or I haven't, I haven't met in person, because now we're meeting people online like you and I. So I ended up planning this trip, and I think I ended up seeing probably 80 people that I hadn't otherwise either met or I hadn't seen in a long time on that trip. But when you say favorite places, I think Yosemite was one of, like you were saying, our national parks are an amazing, amazing treasure. Yosemite just blew me away. I think a lot of it had to do with I had just gotten married, and I had found out that the officiant had COVID 2 days afterwards. And I was stuck in San Francisco thinking, where am I going to go? I can't visit friends. So what am I going to do? And I decided I was going to go to Yosemite. And of course, they warned you, of course, during COVID that it was harder to get into the national parks. And so, but they said if I got there, at 6:00 in the morning, I could get in and not have a problem. So I forced myself to get up earlier than usual, and I went in, and I was basically there alone. And I got to see El Capitan. I got to see all of these places pretty much like alone. And that just was so stunning. So that was a favorite. And then Olympia, that's Washington State. And that was, just this small seaside town, quirky. It was just, but, I have friends in LA, and I loved visiting them. And I did a show and tales there at a Irish pub. So it's hard to choose. I just love the people in most places. I haven't disliked any place I've visited.
Well, we are a likable nation, and one of the things we're going to do is really showcase our country. Not just Europe and all the exotic tours and all the bucket lists that everybody's got, they talk about, but really our own country. We just had a wonderful interview with a young lady who bicycled from out west to Washington, D.C. And her takeaway was how wonderful Americans are. It was not her view of our brand, what I call our brand, before she started to travel. So I want to make this point and then take a little bit of a break because you mentioned Yosemite and come back to wrap up. I want to make this point. There are places all over the world that we are told by the news are not good, and that the people are not good, and don't go there. And when you do go there, you discover fabulous people, wonderful places, terrific food. I'm not talking about putting yourself in any kind of physical danger, but I'm saying that we have more negative. We tend to glom onto the negative, and this really is about the positive. Okay, We'll be right back. I'm going to tell you how to get into those national parks that Martie just mentioned for virtually free. Don't you guys go anywhere. Do you love national parks as I do? Well, if you're 62 years or older, you can buy a $20 yearly pass or an $80 lifetime pass online. The pass covers entrance and standard amenity, day uses, recreation fees for pass holders, and their companions to more than 2,000 recreation sites managed not just by the National Park Service, but by Fish and Wildlife Service, Bureau of Land Management, Bureau of Reclamation, Forest Service, and the Army Corps of Engineers. At per vehicle areas, this one pass covers all passengers in a non-commercial vehicle. And where per person fees are charged, the pass covers up to 3 adult companions. Now, this is a bargain, and you'll find out all about it in our show notes and exactly where to go online to get your pass. And now we are back. Of course, we've been speaking with Martie McNabb, showandtales.com, podcasts, YouTubes, really a way of opening up not only yourself, but other people. Particularly very interesting. I loved her story. I want to repeat that for a second, of a wedding where the bride and groom's family did not know each other. And what a wonderful way to reveal what you want to reveal without embarrassment by taking something precious to you and talking about it. It says so much. So when we conclude this, Martie and I are actually going to go on YouTube, and we're going to put on our Ageless Traveler YouTube channel a demonstration of how she does these show and tales. And you can do it with her at showandtales.com. Let her know you're there. And you can do it with each other. So this is going to be a lot of fun, something a little bit different than we usually do. Now, remember, please go to agelesstraveler.com and join our salon. You'll never have to travel solo. And if you love traveling solo, you'll be strengthened to do that. Make sure that you are on agelesstraveler.com because you get our free newsletter, which will have the Caregiver Travel Guide. And also our latest book, which is already out free of charge to you guys, Luxury Travel for Less. Subscribe. And also, when you go on a podcast on Apple or Spotify or any place else, give us a nice rating and never stop traveling.